Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey everyone, welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Alexa, and today we continue our study of the book of Psalms by looking at Psalms 36 through 40. In Psalm 36, David writes an oracle, or in other words, wise musings. He writes how the wicked pay no attention to the Lord. Instead, they turn away from wisdom and remain on paths of evil. But then David contrasts the wickedness of man with the faithfulness of God. He writes how vast and wide God's faithful love is. God showers his faithful love over his people as he provides and protects them. David ends the psalm rejoicing how in God's faithfulness, the wicked are taken down and not allowed to prevail. In light of the wicked, David writes in Psalm 37 not to be agitated by sinners. He warns that the righteous should not be frustrated over the prosperity of sinners. David reminds them how sinners prosper for a moment, but their end is destruction. Their lives are temporary, and their evil ways and plans will not carry on forever. Instead of being frustrated, the righteous are to trust the Lord. They are to commit their ways to him and rely on him to keep their steps steady. And ultimately, they can trust God because they know that he keeps them secure. Unlike the destructive end of the wicked, the righteous have a promised inheritance to hope in. In Psalm 38, David writes in response to the suffering he's experiencing because of his sin. The consequences of his sin grieve him and weigh him down. And in his grief, David recognizes that God sees and hears his pain. He confesses his sin to the Lord and has hope that God will continue to be gracious to him by removing his enemies. In Psalm 39, David speaks to the brevity of life. David asks God to help him see how short life is so he can use his time solely committed to him. David hopes in the Lord and trusts that God will use his time to shape and teach him before his time on earth ends. Lastly, in Psalm 40, David praises God for his great deliverance. He writes how God has rescued him from the pit and put a new song in his mouth. In response, David proclaims God's righteousness and faithfulness to all people. Because God has delivered him before, David knows that God will deliver him again. Psalms 36 through 40 encourage us to commit our ways to the Lord. Like David, we too should ask God to show us how short our life is so we can use our time wisely. This also involves focusing on what matters most. Instead of focusing on the folly of others and becoming discouraged or frustrated by the sinfulness of the world, we should focus on living for the Lord and making his name known. As we commit our ways to the Lord, his desires become our desires. Everything we do will bring him glory. The brevity of life also reminds us of our eternal hope in Jesus. It's sad to see how those without God live with no regard to the Lord or how short their life is. Without our relationship with Jesus, these people will live eternally separated from him. But as believers, we have the hope that we will spend eternity with the Lord. When sin seems to win or suffering feels hard, we find hope in the eternity to come. But the brevity of life and the reality of the fate of sinners should also encourage us to share the gospel. Like David, we should respond to the deliverance we have received through Christ by proclaiming his name. Through his salvation, Christ has put a new song in our mouth, a gospel song to sing for all to hear. Thanks so much for joining us today. Don't forget that you can find our Story of Redemption study on our website, thedailygraceco.com, and also our Story of Redemption journals that have dedicated journaling space for every chapter of the Bible. And if you're interested in diving deeper into the Psalms, we have a study called Wait on Psalms chapters 31 through 60. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you tomorrow when we go over Psalms 41 through 45.